Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Really appreciate you taking the time to visit tonight and go back to 1965 and relive with me some of the finer moments of Sandy Koufax's perfect game. But before we get to the meat of the video, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude for all the positive responses. Frankly, I'm overwhelmed at the amount of people that responded, and frankly, it's just been stunning to me and very humbling. And I just hope that my future videos here will prove to meet meet expectations. And I just want you to know that I'm having a lot of fun doing this, but I have felt a little bit of pressure now all of a sudden that so many people are watching. So just bear with me. There will be a few technical glitches here and there. The audio is a bit choppy on some of the recording, but the visual should be okay, and that's really what I think everybody's looking for. So if you can just bear with me. I have graduated from learning to turn the computer on and off, but beyond that, I'm still in my apprenticeship. So I'll look forward to guiding you through tonight, and have a good rest of the day for yourselves. Hello everyone, welcome to the Baseball Time Traveler channel. My name is Rob and I want to thank you for joining me today as we visit a day in baseball history. That day being September 9th, 1965, Sandy Koufax's fourth no-hitter and his perfect game. Before we go and visit the game, I'd like to just do a quick overview of what was going on in the world in 1965. In the upper left, you're going to see American astronaut Ed White. He was the first American to walk in space, and this was all part of the buildup to eventually man landing on the moon in July of 1969. To the right of that, the Packers beat the Browns in the NFL championship, 23-12. This ended up being the last NFL championship because the following year, the AFL and the NFL went up against each other, the Packers versus the Chiefs, and the Packers prevailed in what has now become Super Bowl I. This was also the last game for all-time great Jim Brown. He retired in July of 1966. And this was the first of three NFL Super Bowl championships for the Packers. They won this game. They won Super Bowl and Super Bowl I and Super Bowl II. To the right of that picture is the St. Louis Arch, and those of you who live in or around St. Louis or have had a chance to visit St. Louis and see that beautiful structure, it was quite amazing. It was actually completed in 1965. In the lower left there, you see Gail Goodrich of the UCLA Bruins. They were playing the Michigan Wolverines in the NC2A finals. The Bruins prevailed, and that was their second straight NC2A championship. And then they went on to win 10 total over the next 12 years. And that was the John Wooden era, where the Bruins really dominated college basketball and won 7 consecutive NC2A championships. I don't think you're going to see that in the future. In the middle picture there is a scene from the Vietnam War, and at this point the U.S. had really committed itself completely to defending the South Vietnam people in an attempt to stem the flow of communism in Southeast Asia. The United States had deployed up to about 150,000 troops at this point. That number ultimately would get to about 500,000, and that war drug on for another 8 years and was finally concluded in 1973. The picture on the lower right is the Lakers versus the Celtics. Those two went against each other in the NBA finals for the third or fourth time in the early 60s. And each time the Celtics prevailed. It seemed like it was almost a Dodgers-Yankees rivalry where the two teams would go against each other time after time, but the Celtics prevailed each and every time. The Lakers finally did win their first NBA championship as the Los Angeles Lakers in 1972. Now we move to what was going on in the baseball world just a few weeks prior to the perfect game. On August 15th, Masanori Murakami was honored at Candlestick Park as the first Japanese player to play in the major leagues. On August 18th, Hank Aaron hit a home run but was deprived of it in the record books because he hit the ball while he was out of the batter's box. On August 19th, the following day, Jim Maloney threw his second no-hitter of 1965 against none other than the Chicago Cubs, who 3 weeks later Sandy Koufax took care of in perfect order. On the same night, the Dodgers were playing the Giants up in San Francisco, and it was Don Drysdale versus Warren Spahn. Warren Spahn had been recently traded to the Giants from the Mets, and the game ended up going 15 innings. Spahn and Drysdale were both long gone by that time, but the game went 15 innings, and then 3 days later, in that same series, on August 22nd, a Sunday, Juan Marichal and John Roseboro were involved in the infamous bat incident, resulting in a 14-minute brawl at Candlestick. And I watched that game as a 10-year-old with my grandfather, and I will be doing a separate video at a later date on that particular game. On August 31st there, you see Willie Mays. He's set the National League record of 17 home runs for the month of August. And a couple of weeks later, September 13th, he hit his 500th home run. And in the upper right there, Ernie Banks, future Hall of Famer, on September 2nd, hit his 400th home run a week before the perfect game. And then the lower right, that is Bert Campaneris of the Kansas City Athletics. And the night before the perfect game, I also listened to this game on the radio. I had the day off of school on that Thursday, the following day, so I must have been on a radio binge. And my folks must have let me listen to both of these games. But Bert Campaneris played all 9 positions throughout the 9-inning game against the Angels. And I was quite fascinated with that as a little leaguer, that a major league ball player could play all 9 positions, and did quite well. Now we move to essentially the afternoon of September 9th, 1965. And if you look closely in that traffic, you're not going to find any Teslas. You're not going to find any SUVs or minivans. In fact, those were called station wagons back in the day. Seat belts were optional. People smoked cigarettes in their cars pretty freely. It was a little different time. The only thing that really hasn't changed is the traffic. That is LA traffic at its finest right there. So everybody is either heading out of town or heading into town to head up to the ball game, which was about 4 miles up the freeway from where you see there right now. Next picture here is downtown Pasadena. And I grew up in the town of Pasadena. This is Colorado Boulevard, which those of you who have seen the Tournament of Roses parade every January 1st, this is the direction the parade takes, and it's about a 5-mile march down Colorado Boulevard through the town of Pasadena. This next slide brings back immediate memories, and that's why I wanted to put that quote up on the screen there. I want to go back in time, not to change anything, but to feel something again. This is actually the field that I played all my Little League on, and I was so thrilled to be able to see this photograph. I pulled it off the internet, the beauty of the internet. And the only thing that's changed on this diamond in this view is that we didn't have that fancy scoreboard in the back, and we didn't have the padding, the green padding there you see on the backstop. But other than that, everything is pretty much the same, and I can visualize myself pitching in the championship game. I was on the Yankees, and we were playing the Dodgers, and we prevailed in that game, and it was something I'll always remember. Now we move to my kitchen. This is where I listen to the game, and in the lower left there you're going to see a facsimile of the radio that I listened to. It was a very simple radio back then. We didn't have the fancy digital where you just push a button, it automatically tunes. You actually had to turn the knob to fine tune it to reduce the static that you would often hear. And in that picture you see my mom. My brother is on the left side. I'm there in the striped shirt as a happy 10-year-old, ready to sit down. My dad's taking that photograph, and then one of my little sisters is there at the bottom of the photograph. And that was the kitchen. You could, as an adult, probably could spread your arms out, and your wingspan could almost touch each wall on each side. All right, now we'll focus in on the game. This is an overhead view of Dodger Stadium back in the 60s, and that hazy appearance at the top of the photograph is not fog, it's actually smog. The air quality in Los Angeles in 1965 was pretty poor, and those of you who grew up in LA during that time can attest to that. And I remember oftentimes suffering from shortness of breath as a kid. We'd go out and, we'd play at recess at school or kickball, capture the flag, that sort of thing. And we'd come home from school and I'd actually be short of breath. My mom would force us to take a quick nap before we headed to the park to play baseball or throw the football, that sort of thing. The ticket to the left field box then was $3.50. And I got to believe that a field box now at Dodger Stadium is somewhere in the $75 range. Beers were probably 25 cents at that point, but I wasn't drinking beer in 1965. Next slide is the cards, the team cards for the Dodgers and the Cubs. And you'll see those a little later. All the cards that you see in the video, you will see. I'll present them toward the end of the video itself. Now we'll introduce the starting lineup for the Cubs. We have several rookies in this lineup. Don Young was recently called up playing center field. Glenn Beckert, another rookie, playing second base. And we have three future Hall of Famers in a row: Billy Williams in left field, Ron Santo at third base, and Ernie Banks at first. Rookie playing in his very first game was Byron Brown in left field. Chris Krug is the catcher, rookie. Don Kessinger, rookie, playing shortstop. And journeyman pitcher Bob Henley, who had just been recently called up. He had been traded from the Giants to the Cubs early in 1965 season and had been playing just a couple of weeks. Now we'll look at the card setup for the players. Look at what their cards look like. And there's Bob Henley. He's got his 1966 card. You'll see several 66 cards depicted here because there were no 65 versions for these particular players. Starting lineup for the Dodgers, we have 1962 MVP Maury Wills at shortstop, Jim Gilliam at third base, Willie Davis center field, Sweet Lou Johnson, who will play a pivotal role in this game, in left field, Ron Fairley in right field, Jim Lefevre, rookie, playing second base, Wes Parker, longtime first baseman with the Dodgers. He was in his second or third year at this point, and he was succeeded by Steve Garvey several years later. And then at catcher, Jeff Torborg, who was replacing the injured John Roseboro. And at pitcher, the left arm of God, Sandy Koufax. And here are the Dodgers depicted in their cards. You'll notice a couple of the cards, Gilliam and Wills, didn't have 1965 cards. And Johnson did not have a 65 card either there in left field. We now move to the first inning. Keep in mind that this game was not televised and it was on radio broadcast only. So the visual documentation of this game is very limited. Fortunately, I was able to pull a few pictures off the internet and put them into this video. And hopefully you'll be able to follow along. I'm not going to give a pitch by pitch, blow by blow account of the game, but I'll go through the first few innings, give you a feel for the game, and then most importantly, we get toward the end, and that's when time really goes quickly and it'll be enjoyable. All right, so the first inning, the rookie Don Young comes up, and it's he was recently called up from the minors, and he pops up to second base, rookie Jim Lefevre. Then the next two batters, Glenn Beckert and Billy Williams, both strike out swinging. In the second inning, Santo comes up and he fouls out to the catcher, Jeff Torborg. And then Ernie Banks strikes out, which is the first of his 3 times striking out in the game. And then Byron Brown, it was his first major league at bat, and he lined out to center fielder Willie Davis. In the third inning, Chris Krug lined out to center field, and then Don Kessinger flew out on an 0-2 pitch, and Henley came up and he struck out. So we've gone through the first 9 batters, all out in order. And then Sandy proceeds in the 4th inning to continue his dominance through the 5th inning. Then in the bottom of the 5th, Lou Johnson comes up and he walks. So Henley at this point loses his perfect game because he had a perfect game in place as well. Ron Fairley then bunts Lou to second base, and then Lou decides he wants to attempt to steal a third base, and he does so. And in so doing, Chris Krug, the rookie, overthrows Ron Santo at third base. Ball goes into left field, and Johnson scores easily, and that breaks up the 0-0 deadlock. Now we move to the 6th inning. Sandy continues his dominance, strikes out another batter. He's continued 6 innings, striking out at least one batter every inning. 7th inning continues, strikes out another batter. Then we move to the bottom of the 7th. Henley now still has a no-hitter in place. Sandy's got a perfect game in place, and this is when it gets interesting. Ron Fairley and Willie Davis come up to the plate, and they both ground out. But Lou Johnson, who was the hero of the 5th inning, scoring the unearned run, he comes up and then hits a weak bloop single into short right field. I shouldn't say single. He hits a bloop fly, lands in short right field. Banks tries to retrieve it, but by the time Ernie gets the ball, Johnson gets to second base safely. And then Fairley grounds out to end the inning. So in one short stroke, a weak hit ends Bob Henley's no-hitter, and Lou Johnson becomes the first. Now we go to the 8th inning, and I always like this picture. It looks a little dirty, but to me it's more like Sandy is throwing some serious heat and he's just blowing smoke around. First batter, future Hall of Famer Ron Santo comes up. He strikes out looking. Future Hall of Famer Ernie Banks comes up, strikes out looking. And then to continue the poetry in motion, rookie Byron Brown comes up, strikes out looking. Now we move to the 9th inning. And this is what the Cubs batters are looking at as they come up to face Sandy in the 9th inning. I thought this was such a great photograph. So what I'm going to try and do here is give you a sense of what I was able to listen to as a 10-year-old kid on the radio. So Chris Krug comes up, he strikes out. Joe Malfitano, he's pitch hitting for Don Kessinger, he strikes out. And then the last batter for the inning, Harvey Keene, who had been recently traded from the Giants, he comes up and he approaches the plate, and then I'm going to turn it over to Vin Scully.
So Harvey Keene is batting for Bob Henley. The time on the scoreboard is 9:44. The date, September the 9th, 1965. And KOUFAX working on veteran Harvey Keene. Sandy into his windup, and the pitch, a fastball for a strike. He has struck out, by the way, 5 consecutive batters. And that's gone unnoticed. Sandy ready, and the strike one pitch. Very high, and he lost his hat. He really forced that one. That's only the second time tonight where I have had the feeling that Sandy threw instead of pitched, trying to get that little extra. And that time he tried so hard his hat fell off. He took an extremely long stride to the plate, and Torborg had to go up to get it. 1-1 to Harvey Keene. Now he's ready. Fastball high, ball 2. You can't blame a man for pushing just a little bit now. Sandy backs off, mops his forehead, runs his left index finger along his forehead, dries it off on his left pants leg. All the while, Keane just waiting. Now Sandy looks into his windup, and the 2-1 pitch to Keane. Swung on and missed. Strike 2. It is 9:46 p.m. 2-2 to Harvey Keane. 1 strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed. A perfect game.
And here's something that I found was what I'll call the classic quote of the night. As you just saw, Joe Amalfitano comes up and he struck out. And as he's walking back to the dugout, Harvey Keane passes him. He's walking up toward the plate to face Sandy KOUFAX. And Harvey says to Amalfitano, "Wait for me. I'll be right back." Kind of a precursor of things to come. As it turns out, Harvey Keane has the distinction of not only being the final out of this game, but he was the final out of Sandy KOUFAX's perfect game, no-hitter against the Giants 2 years earlier in 1963. And here we have a good look at the score sheet for the game. You can freeze your camera if you want to freeze your computer, take a look at the details, but a lot of Ks on there. He struck out 14 batters and a lot of zeros. And those are the 3 stars of the game. Henley on the right, Sandy, of course, holding his 4 balls with zeros on them for his no-hitter, and then Lou Johnson on the left there. And I'll talk about them a little bit later when we review the baseball cards. All right, some post-game notes, and I'm going to just do this off the top of my head. There were some pretty impressive statistics that come out of this game. First off, Sandy became the 6th pitcher at this time, 6th pitcher in baseball in the modern era to throw a perfect game, and he also was the first left-hander to throw a perfect game. He threw 113 pitches throughout the 9 innings. 79 of which were strikes. He struck out 14 batters, and he struck out at least 1 batter in every inning. Some pretty impressive statistics there. And then to sum it all up, and this is for your review here, but to sum it all up, in a 36-day span from that perfect game, he had 10 starts and 1 relief appearance. As it turns out, he made a relief appearance the next week against the Cubs back in Wrigley Field. He threw a total of 78 innings and had a under 1 ERA. He struck out 93 in those 78 innings. But the 2 statistics that really blow me away is, and you would never see this in today's game, would we? It's 7 complete games, 6 of which were shutouts. Unbelievable. All right, now we're going to go to the cards for the perfect game, and hopefully you'll enjoy seeing the actual cards that I've been able to collect. It's been so much fun. I collect all ungraded cards. So any graded cards that you see, those are ones that I bought ungraded several weeks or several months ago and had them graded. And I hope you enjoy seeing the actual cards. All right, now we'll move to the team cards for both the Dodgers and Cubs. Followed by the rookie card for Don Young and Byron Brown. And then here's Glenn Beckert's rookie card and his second-year card from 1966. Next is future Hall of Famer Ron Santo. Followed by two more future Hall of Famers, Billy Williams and Ernie Banks. Next is Chris Krug, the catcher, who was involved in the play that caused the only unearned run in the ball game. Followed by Don Kessinger, who ended up teaming up with Glenn Beckert for several years with the Cubs. It was quite a double play combination. Next, we'll move to one of the stars of the show, Bob Henley. It's his Giants card from 1965 and then his Cubs card from 1966. Bob Henley, just to give you a quick background on Bob, started with the Braves organization in 1961 or thereabouts, pitched for the Braves for a couple of years, then was traded to the Giants in 1963. He was a starter for the Giants throughout the 64 season, but in 65 was relegated to the bullpen and ended up being part of a trade with Harvey Keene to the Cubs for Len Gabrielson and catcher Ed Bailey. And then Henley spent some time in the minors and then was brought up during the summer and compiled a 2-2 record before this game started. He ended up finishing his career in 1967 and then had quite a nice life after that. Quite a gentleman. I did a little research on him, and he was definitely well respected in his community post-career. And the last two batters for the Cubs were pinch hitter Joe Amalfitano and then Harvey Keene, who was part of that Henley trade. And here's his 66 card as a member of the Cubs. Now we'll move to the Dodgers. And I thought I'd start off with the manager, Hall of Famer Walt Alston. He managed the Dodgers for 23 consecutive years, and I think he was famous for signing 23 one-year contracts. He managed both the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Had quite a career. Several world championships and several pennants. Next is 1962 MVP Maury Wills. And you'll notice that he has a Fleer card. This is 63 Fleer card. Maury did not sign with Topps during the course of the early 60s, and I think first appeared on a Topps card in 1967 as a member of the Pittsburgh Pirates after he was traded from the Dodgers. Next is Jim Gilliam, longtime Dodger, who I mentioned earlier was activated as a coach, from coaching to playing third base for the Dodgers for the predominantly part of the 1965 season. Sorry, I'm stumbling here a little bit. But he does not have a 65 card, and Jim ended up becoming a full-time coach the following season. Next is longtime center fielder Willie Davis. I remember Willie Davis from kind of a sad incident for him. In the 1966 World Series against the Baltimore Orioles, he actually committed 3 errors in the same inning. And I remember listening to that game, and it was really sad because I think he dropped 2 balls, as I recall, and then overthrew third base to just compound the problem. But the Dodgers ended up getting swept in that series. So it was a tough inning, tough day for Willie Davis, and a tough series for the Dodgers. Okay, next we're going to go to the star of the show, other than Mr. KOUFAX. And this is Lou Johnson's rookie card on the right, 1960 Topps, while he was a member of the Cubs, ironically. And that's his 1966 Dodgers card. His only other baseball card prior to this time was the 1963 Topps, when he was a member of the Milwaukee Braves. Quick background on Lou. He was signed by the Yankees organization in 1953 and then essentially bounced around in the minor leagues for another 8 years and finally made it to the bigs, and
then started with the Cubs. He was traded to the Angels at one point in, I think, 1962, and then was traded to the Braves, and then finally in 1965 was traded to the Dodgers, and he spent most of 65 in the minor league organization at Spokane, and was only called up after Tommy Davis, who was a two-time National League champion, batting champion for the Dodgers. He sustained a very serious ankle injury, and Lou was called up to replace him, and ended up not only having a great game here and was kind of the star of the show as the only base runner all day, but he also had a very nice World Series as well. Next is outfielder Ron Fairly, longtime mainstay for the Dodgers, good player. Followed by Wes Parker, who is now in his first full season with the Dodgers at first base, and he stayed there until the early 70s when he was ultimately replaced by Steve Garvey. And here's the rookie card for Jim Lefevre, played at second base. And here is Jim's second-year card, first solo appearance on a card. Had many good seasons with the Dodgers during the late 60s. Then we have the two replacements, Dick Tracewski, who came in at second base for that ninth inning, and utility infielder John Kennedy, who came in at third base. And then we'll conclude with the battery for the Dodgers. Jeff Torborg was replacing John Roseboro, who had been injured 3 weeks earlier in that bat incident, and Roseboro was still on the DL at this point. Torborg came in, caught the perfect game, and as it ends up, Jeff has the distinction of catching two other no-hitters in his career, one for Bill Singer as a member of the Angels in 1970, and then 3 years later in 1973, also caught a no-hitter. It was the first no-hitter for this particular pitcher, who was also on the Angels, and his name happened to be Nolan Ryan. And we'll finish with the left arm of God, Sandy Koufax, who, as you all know, had a tremendous run from 1962 until his retirement in 1966. In his career, I think he won 165 games and only lost 78. That's off the top of my head, so don't quote me on that. But what a wonderful pitcher he really became. I was so fortunate to be able to watch him pitch several times when the Dodgers would play the Giants, and he was just such a good man as well. And I'll give you one other follow-up story involving Sandy and Harvey Keene, who was the last out in the perfect game here. As it turns out, 2 years earlier, Harvey Keene was also the last out in Sandy's no-hitter against the Giants in 1963. I thought that was a great little side note. And one further side note that comes to mind, Lou Johnson and Bob Henley likely were teammates, but likely played at least a few games together back in 1963 when both were members of the Milwaukee Braves. So that'll conclude the review of the actual cards. I hope you enjoyed that, and now we'll conclude the video. Thank you very much for watching.